normally we would all get together with our ideas and then we'd sit down in a room and play them out. And instead what's been happening is we've been slowly demoing ideas to each other and uploading them. And so like the whole song is up here in my head and nobody else has heard it.
Oh,
like it's all it. Ow, I just poked myself in the eye.
It's right here in my face. Yeah.
Welcome. You are entering into a strange dimension. A dimension where narratives from across space and time come together. Narratives that could have, might have, or should have been all exist here in one space. This is CineCasters Ultimate Timeline.
Hello and welcome to CineCasters. This is the show where we watch movies and talk about them and repitch them. And I am joined, as always, by my very good friend, Andrew DeYoung, from across the country.
From all the way across the country. Not all the way, but from across the country.
Three time zones away.
Three time zones away. What are we, 6 hours difference?
3 hours.
3 hours.
I think when you were in Amsterdam, it was 6 hours.
No, when I was in Amsterdam, it was 9 hours.
That's right. It was 6 hours to Toronto, and then 3 hours to here, additional.
Yeah. I always forget how long it is, but yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a ways. And right now we are recording this in the midst of, this is what, week 2 or week 3 of...
It depends on where you are. So right. I think this is week 3 for us in Canada, but like some of my friends in Europe and in Amsterdam are on like week 4 or 5.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And this is the week of social isolation due to the COVID-19 outbreak. Pandemic
actually. Now, yeah. We've reached 1 million, so it officially has more followers than we do. But I mean, it definitely has more followers than we do on YouTube. If anyone was keeping track, all 16 of you we're up. Actually, since we've been posting more frequently, we've had more listeners and more more views. Yeah, we're up to like 3 hours a week. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so some people are actually listening to more than 5 minutes of us.
Well, I hate to break it to you. That was me listening to it 3 times.
Oh no,
no,
that's okay. I definitely do like to go back and listen to them too, because sometimes I like to critique our own pitches.
Sometimes I'll do that too. Yeah. Occasionally I'll go back and re-listen to an episode.
Plus, there's some good stuff in there. Like I went back in January and listened to the Matrix pitch again, and I cannot get both of our pitches were just unreal.
I think that's our best episode. I think those are our best pitches, really.
Yeah, for sure, both of those are our best pitches. But I also think that I'm still. It's been over a year, and I'm still kind of a little fucked up about downsizing. I still don't know whether I like it or not.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
I really like my pitch for downsizing, but I don't know how I feel about the movie. The more we talked about it, the more I liked it.
Yeah, I think it's a much smarter movie than people gave it credit, and I think that's in part, and we talked about it on the episode, but that's in part due to the fact that it's a satirical comedy, and I think it makes more sense if you watch it in the body of work, Alexander Payne's work. It fits.
What else has he done? Because I don't know that I've actually seen any of his other work.
His other movies are Election, Sideways, About Schmidt, The Descendants. Those are the 4 I can think of off the top of my head.
About The Descendants, like the Disney movie?
No, The Descendants is the one with George Clooney, and Shailene Woodley is in it as well.
Oh, weird.
It's a great movie. Okay. It won him Best Adapted Screenplay at the Academy Awards.
Wow. Okay.
3 or 4 years ago. But his best movie, in my opinion, is About Schmidt. The ending of that movie always gets me.
Okay. But what you're saying is like he does sort of satirical comedy, but there's a lot of thought that goes into it.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's satirical. I mean, there is an element of the humor that is satire. It's very understated humor, and so there are these dramas that start off as comedies. They're very witty, understated comedies, and then they also deal with very heavy, serious themes.
Yeah. Speaking of dealing with serious themes, today's episode is The Island by Michael Bay.
The Michael Bay classic from 2005.
Is it 5 or 6?
2005. I have it right here on IMDb. Okay, it says 2005 in brackets.
2005, yeah. So this is pre-Transformers.
This is pre-Transformers.
Yeah. So, thoughts on The Island?
Well, I don't know how Michael Bay manages to get terrible performances out of such great actors. Like, this movie, it just feels like a giant commercial, really.
Yeah.
But I'll start off. You know what? I won't shit on Michael Bay yet. I'll start off with.
We'll get there.
I'll start on the things in the movie that I think worked. There were a lot of great ideas in this movie. There was so many cool things you could have done with this movie. I think that's maybe why I was frustrated, because I went, oh wow, I think I was trying to figure out if it was smarter than I thought it was, or if it was trying to be smart and just wasn't, or even if it was trying at all. Because I actually did look up an interview. I was like, I wonder what he was thinking, because it's like there's definitely something there. Like, did he just? I want to know what happened. So I actually looked up some interviews with Michael Bay. He just talks about it's like, yeah, well, they wanted a summer blockbuster action movie, and I went, okay, I can do that. And then he really just talks about the action sequences.
Of course he does.
And I'm like, what? How did you? So that's what, because I have wanted to know, like, is he really just a bad filmmaker? Well, actually, I'll say this: I don't think he's a bad filmmaker. He just makes a very specific kind of movie.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say he's a bad filmmaker either, because if you want to watch a, good action movie with like well done set pieces, big set pieces, and lots of moving parts, then Michael Bay delivers.
Well, the thing is, I mean, on the list of things that I thought were working, the post-production end of things, specifically the sound design, the visual effects, those are elements that he actually does get. And the thing is, his movies do look like they look cool. Yeah, and that's why I'm saying in part it's like a commercial, because even the editing is like way too fast. There's parts where it's like, oh, okay, now you just have all these shots and you're just throwing them at me. Yeah. But they look cool. Like, it looks cool. It sounds cool. But it's just that's not enough to sustain my interest for 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah, this movie is so long.
Way too long. I would take a guess that you could actually, in its current form, you could edit what's there, lose maybe 45 minutes of it, and you would have a semi-decent watchable movie.
Yeah,
maybe.
For sure. My biggest complaints with this movie, well, I'll start with the good stuff, I guess. I actually think that the chemistry at the beginning, when they're still in the facility or whatever, I think the chemistry between Lincoln and Jordan works. Mm-hmm. I think because they're supposed to feel like sort of teenagers, I think think that's the idea, yeah. And so they're sort of like wide-eyed wonder at how things work and like what physical attraction is. I was like, oh, this kind of works actually. So I'm okay with that. I'll save that for my pitch when I get there. My weirdest thing with this movie is I like this movie, except the longer I watch it, the less I like it, if that makes sense. Like when I first started this movie, I was like, yeah, okay, there's some great ideas, some great setup. And the longer it goes, the more I'm like disappointed by the lack of payoff. Yeah, exactly. I think I would echo the same thing. There was some themes in there. And actually, when I was getting down to doing my pitch, I was like torn between going between two themes. And I'll talk a little bit about what those themes were when we get there. But I was torn between going between two themes. Now, there's a lot of things, well, not too many things that I didn't like. I hate the way this movie is shot.
Okay, yeah.
Everything about it feels like the color saturation was weird.
Okay.
All the time. And there's a lot of shaky cam. And you were right about the editing, too. Like, I was like, this movie, the action sequences are really great. I just don't like the way that it's shot.
Yeah.
I have a really hard time with that, which is weird because Transformers was really smooth.
That's interesting, yeah. You mean in terms of, like, it wasn't as messy?
Yeah, I mean, Transformers still has a lot of shaky cam and whatnot, but, like, I mean, shaky cam can work, I guess. It just, sometimes I would feel, like, super disoriented.
Right, yeah. Well, in one of the interviews I watched, he basically talks about... It's actually pretty funny. He basically, he says, I showed up on one day and I just walked. I didn't talk to anybody. I just walked right to a spot and I said, camera goes there, camera goes there, camera goes there, camera goes there. I have 5 cameras. And they said, but Michael, we only have 1 camera. And I said, well, if you're going to work with me, you got to have 5 cameras. I am quoting the interview.
Wow.
Pretty
I'm shaking
closely.
my head right now.
Yeah, that is. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Dude.
So here's my list of things that I really didn't like. So shaky can't. Oh, what else? Says so that whole like simulated cage match with the Xbox logo.
Oh yeah, that was hilarious.
I was like, oh, that's cool. So they like know how to fight, but then that never paid off. So I was like, what was the point of that?
Yeah, that was an interesting point too, because later they do get into a fight, and I was like, oh, okay, she'll be able to
she'll be like
herself.
a total badass, and
And no.
So here's a big one for me. This took me out of the movie actually in terms of immersion. There's a point in time where they like fall into the room where there's a bunch of like, I want to say like human fetuses.
Oh, okay.
And then Lincoln literally like falls into the room and he like bounces off a table from like 6 feet and lands on his chest off the table and then hits the floor. And he like gets up and he's like, oh, that hurts. And then he sort of like starts running with Jordan as they're escaping. And I was like, does Michael Bay understand how pain works? Like so much happens in this movie. And yeah, they're like cut up and bruised. But like at one point in time, Lincoln hits a dude with a crowbar over the head. And the dude is like, it's like a dude who gets his like
he's got his hand nailed to his
hand, and like Lincoln beats him over the head with like a crowbar with 2 like heavy blows overhead, and the dude is just like, oh, my hand, like, no, dude, your head is either caved in or you're unconscious. Like, that is not how a human body reacts to pain. And I felt myself really taken out of the movie because of this. This movie felt a little too long. I said that. I found myself liking this movie better the first time I saw it, but I was in high school, so maybe I was just impressed more.
Okay.
This okay. This is another thing that brought me out of the movie was they're so worried about not dying, and because killing would be wrong, that they don't want to be killed, that they're willing to kill others. Mm-hmm. So you know what I mean? Like,
yes, yeah.
They're like,
oh, that's a good point.
That was a little messy. Okay. There's this whole thing where they can implant memories. It's only touched on, but like they can literally be like, oh, there's like 5 or 6 different backgrounds and you all have like pink tassels in your bike or whatever, but they're all pretty much the same. And I was like, okay, wait, there's the technology to implant memories into people, and this movie is not about that. Like, you're just gonna glaze over that?
Yeah.
I thought really, really hard about doing something with that in my pitch, but I was like, I think that changes way too much of the movie if I do that.
That's kind of more, because I had a similar thought, but that's more Blade Runner. Blade Runner deals with that.
Yeah, for sure.
More.
That's why I was like, I don't want to touch that, but like, you're just gonna glaze over, just breeze past that point and not do anything about it. Like, you literally have clones you could implant memories into. And like, okay, my last 2 things were the whole idea that the Agnets or whatever they're called are like all of a sudden developing memories. I hated that. They're like developing memories, like the way Lincoln remembers how to drive a motorcycle because his like Tom Lincoln, his like donor or whatever, his original knows how to do that. I was like, no. DNA doesn't work that way. The human brain doesn't work that way. As a plot point, I know why it has to be there. It has to move the plot along. But if that's what makes the movie dumb, is if it hinges around this thing, it's dumb.
Yeah, I agree. And I also felt like in terms of driving the plot forward, it didn't even work. It didn't even make sense in the story either. Like, why would he? Are you talking about the time where he drives the car?
Well, when he drives the car, but the fact that he also like draws the boat from memory.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I agree. It was like,
if you can implant memories, if you can already implant memories, then like an easy way to get around that, if I would just like soft pitch really, really quick, would just be like, oh, you know, now that we have the technology to like recreate humans for organs or whatnot, we also implant the subconscious with memories from the original so that we can use the brain if we need to.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Like, I mean, that's not even great science, but that's at least a way to fix the plot.
Yeah, actually,
because then it all comes through his subconscious.
Yeah, exactly. It makes more sense than what was in there anyway.
Okay, this is my number 1 biggest gripe, and it's not even a gripe with the plot. It's just it's just so I hate this part because it reveals such a lack of forethought or a lack of understanding. All right, here we go.
Okay.
During the highway chase scene, which looks really cool because the jet bike was dope. I want one of those. They're on a truck. Okay, it's like an automatic truck, or it's driven by a computer. They're on a truck. Do you know what was on the back of that truck?
The giant metal dumbbells?
Yeah, do you know what those were?
Are they like wheels for like a tank?
They're train wheels.
They're train wheels. Aha.
Except earlier in the movie, we saw a train that literally fucking hovers! You don't need train wheels because trains hover. Like,
I could hear the audio peaking in that. That is, but you're right. You know what? I didn't notice that. That is hilarious.
Like, trains hover now. They literally were on a train that hovers. Why are there wheels?
Absolutely right. That's so funny. Huh?
Yeah. Now, maybe they're like old train wheels that are being removed from somewhere, but like, that to me seems like such a lack of forethought, such a lack of understanding of your own world.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I spent way too much time watching Michael Bay interviews today. Wow. There's another bit where he's like, he talks about that. He's like, oh yeah, well, we were in the writing process and I was driving behind one of those trucks and I thought, man, that looks dangerous. And I said, well, that's going in the movie. There's the story from Michael Bay himself.
Such a lack of forethought. My overall feeling from this movie was somebody wrote an interesting movie that deals with like autonomy, human human personhood, cloning. There's actually a little bit of stuff about like Sartre and Nietzsche in there that I'll get to in my pitch because and Michael Bay got a hold of it and was like, yeah, I can make this into a summer blockbuster.
Yeah. That's what it feels. Like. That's what it feels like.
Yeah. Because the beginning of the movie feels like they set some things up, like I talked about, and I was like, oh man, that should have been a thing.
Yeah, I agree. I could not agree more.
Yeah. Anything that you want to go? I really felt like I had to talk about that train thing because I was so indignant, so angry about that.
So the only other thing, so there were some things in it that I actually really, really liked. One of those things was the scenes where Ewan McGregor plays off of himself.
Yeah, that's fun.
I thought that was actually very interesting. Also because they were able to use the fact that Ewan McGregor in real life actually is Scottish.
Yeah.
And so to have, like, that was I thought that was fun. The guilt complex, this was actually something I thought could have been explored more, was the Steve Buscemi character.
Is that how you pronounce it? Buscemi? I always thought it was Buscemi.
I always thought it was Buscemi, but then I listened to an interview where they called him Buscemi. So I don't know.
At least we both know who we're talking about.
We're talking about the same guy. Yeah. I felt like there was more to that character in terms of this guy who knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And feels bad about it, and that's why he's helping them. And I thought that was actually really interesting. So I actually worked some of that into my pitch. And the other thing that occurred to me in the beginning, and it wasn't really explored, and I don't even know if it's relevant, but I thought as an idea what was interesting was it's a dystopia that they live in, but it's a dystopia that's actually quite livable.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's actually a better reflection of what a dystopia would actually be like. If you were in it, you would actually... I mean, I think that would be... I think that's a much more interesting way to approach dystopia as a concept, is it's like, it actually is okay, but there's something that's off about it.
Well, I think
it's not really in this movie.
Like dystopias in general, like we always talk about dystopias, especially lately, as like post-apocalyptic. But like in reality, humans crave some kind of community. Mm-hmm. So I think we would create a functional society.
Yeah, exactly.
That is
I think so
off
too.
And isn't great. I mean, but works.
Well, I'm also relating it to a bit of present day, and I don't mean the COVID per se. I just mean even beyond that with the surveillance technology that we have. And there is an element of our own existence day to day that is, to some aspect, dystopic, if you look at it historically. I mean, if George Orwell were able to see into the future from when he wrote 1984, he'd go, well, you guys, like, you're okay with this?
Yeah,
but
we do live in a surveillance state. Like,
exactly.
It's just we volunteered into it.
Exactly, and I think that's in terms of dystopia. I just personally, and this is just my taste, I just find that more interesting.
Yeah.
Where it's like you go, well, it's actually it's not like, yeah, there's problems and there's this weird. There are elements to it where you can question the ethics of what's going on, but at the same time, at least I'm speaking for myself, I'm able to enjoy a very comfortable existence. And there's a lot of questions that come along with that too, in terms of, like what that does to your psychology. What does that change about the way we interact? I don't know. In terms of dystopia as a genre or exploring it, I think I just find that more interesting. This movie started out with that, maybe a little bit. It didn't really go that way, but that was just a thought I had.
I felt like you could explore the other side of that too, with the fact that like the ethics behind having a dystopia, but from the outside. So we could explore like Tom Lincoln is literally a person who is so privileged that he can afford to put someone who is alive. Mm-hmm. And when he finds out about it, he still is like, no, I don't want to die. Like, you're my insurance policy. And like, exactly. even though he knew that Jordan and Lincoln were living, breathing things, he was still like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like, so I think there's some ethics that could have been explored there too, especially if you wanted to play around with the Ewan McGregor riffing off of himself, which was done very naturally. Like, it never felt like they were just like the two of them in a two shot that had clearly been like split. Mm-hmm. Like, whenever they interact with each other, it was like, oh, this is clearly fairly well done. I'm talking about them sitting in the car together, like, feels pretty natural.
Yeah, I think in terms of the actual filmmaking, I actually felt that was the strongest part of the movie. Was that specifically, because the performances didn't feel forced in that section. So I agree. So anyway, those are my thoughts on this wonderful film.
Yeah, this wonderful film. This film is like classically disappointing. There's some great ideas in there. Yeah. I'm actually going to get into it. If that's okay.
Same with me. Yeah. I'm excited to hear your pitch.
Yeah,
Should we do pitches now?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm going to get into it if that's okay.
Do it. Yeah. Go for
it. Because I've been beating around the bush for too long, and I finally. So my biggest thing, my two problems with this movie were it sets up this sort of Sartrean raison d'etre, which is reason to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because Lincoln starts asking like why am I special? Why am I here?
Right.
And we don't really do anything with that. And I was like, oh, there's something really, really neat about that. And then the other one was like, they refer to Dr. Merrick, that's Sean Bean's character, that he has a god complex, and it comes up a couple times within the first like half an hour of the movie. And I was like, oh, there's something Nietzschean there. And so I chose to follow the Nietzschean one instead of the Sartrean one. There's a little bit of Sartre in there. But I chose to follow that because I think it's interesting. Like, just talking about like being, what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to have a reason to exist? And then what? So there's a little bit of that, but it's mostly explored from the Nietzschean side, and I'll talk about why that is. But I'm doing mine a little bit different of a pitch. I actually think this movie works better if it's a young adult novel.
Oh, interesting.
So I'm still you could still adapt it into a movie, which sure, fine, but I actually think this movie works better if it's a young adult novel, because I just feel like the way that Lincoln and Jordan interact with each other works well when we treat them like teenagers. So I was just like, you know what? They're just teenagers now.
Oh, that's an interesting way to do it.
So like I'm also a sucker for young adult romance and fiction, so
hey,
so
you know what?
Like, go for it.
There is some great fiction. It gets knocked a lot, but I get it.
Yeah. So I'm just going to get into it now with keeping in mind that like there's different things. So we're introduced to Lincoln, who's a young teenager who lives in a world that appears like basically he lives in a small community that is like fenced off and gated off. but it's in like the outside. It's outside. So it's fenced and gated off, and they're told they're not supposed to go beyond the fence. And it's a fully functional society. It's just like more primitive, and they have different like social rules than we might. But like there's children. Like it's a fully functioning society of about maybe 100 people, and they sustain off of like farming and fishing and whatnot. But there's not like a lot of wildlife really. So any of the fishing they do is like shellfish, and so there's still a contamination. They've been told there's some kind of contamination beyond, and that's why they're not supposed to leave. So there's about 100 people in this community. So they still have the lottery system in place, but it's far more limited. It only happens like every so often, like when there is also still like I guess officials in there that are not, I guess I call them like special. So like people in the community are told they're special. You're special. Like you're special. Eventually, you might get the chance to go to the island if the lottery happens. The lottery doesn't happen very often. Like maybe once in a blue moon. And so then there's these people who are like not special in the community but they constantly they're like, you're special, you get to go to the island eventually. So then one of these not special people, official, is called his name Dr. Merrick, and he's in charge of like the community's like psychological, social, and physiological well-being. And so he, Lincoln is now of age where like his body is changing, yay puberty, and so Dr. Merrick starts like talking with him, helping him through, and Lincoln begins asking questions like, where does Dr. Merrick go when he's not there in our community? Because like he doesn't spend all his time there. He checks in, once a week or whatever, but he's not always in the community. So where else does he go? And everyone else doesn't seem to be. They're more worried about living rather than they are about asking questions. So the only friend that Lincoln has is his best friend Jordan, and they've been friends for their whole lives, and they sort of do everything together. But when Lincoln starts talking about these questions, like why does everyone say we're special? Why am I special? What makes me special? This is Sartrean philosophy. Jordan sort of rolls her eyes, but she humors him. She's like, oh, we're friends, but I hate it when you get into these kinds of like moods. And he's like, but why? Like, what's the reason that we're special? And why are some people not special? So this can go on, and then all of a sudden a disease finds its way into the community, and both of Lincoln's parents die. And he's left wondering, like, where was Dr. Merrick when all of this happened? Right? Dr. Merrick shows up after everyone, like those people have died, and the virus sort of dissipates. But where was Dr. Merrick during all of this? And so while they're burying the dead, he's like asking these questions, and he's really upset that his parents have died. And then we see Lincoln and Jordan go to the library, but there's nothing really written there. It's all like just teaching about reading and stuff like that. There's not really like anything that they're looking for, either philosophically or medically about the virus or anything like that. So at the library, there's a teacher. He's like the teacher. He's another one of the officials at the community. So he's not special. And his name is McCord. He's the what's his name? Buscemi character.
Okay.
Yeah. And he basically says he like hands Lincoln a very special book, and just basically is like, read this and it might help you out. They also talk a little bit about Merrick, and McCord says, he says that Dr. Merrick has a bit of a god complex, and Lincoln is like, well, what does that mean? And so he's left wondering, and so he goes to read this book. A little while passes. Jordan is called to the island and is going to leave. Lincoln is upset by this because he's clearly like they're starting to develop feelings for each other, but she's like, I have a chance and you might get there too. And so he gets really upset with this, goes to see McCord, sees McCord leave through a secret door in the library. And this can basically be like what was in the movie, where like we see Lincoln seeing all the horrors that are done in the facility. So he realizes that this community that he's been in is actually like inside of a facility. It's not outside at all. And in fact, he belongs in like a silo. His community that he lives in is like like silo 6 of like 10 silos, and they're all exactly the same. And the reason Dr. Merrick disappears is because he is the one of the scientists / owner of Merrick Corp, or whatever you want to call it, where the facility is, and he goes from community to community, from silo to silo, checking in on each of the people. And the reason that they're all still alive is because not only are they clones, or I guess not just clones, but they're like fully functioning like human farms, and they're used for, if like Jordan was used because somebody who's a match to her the reason she's called to the island is because somebody needs an organ. But the disease that was introduced into the community was also to measure the psychological and medical effects of what happens to communities, to human beings, when viruses are released. And then that's how Merrick makes all his money, is because he has organs and finds cures and stuff like that. And so Lincoln then wants to escape with Jordan, who resists, but he shows her. They make it out back into the larger facility. Then we can have some fun action sequences, and it turns out McCord was actually trying to bring down the Merrick Corporation from the inside. He doesn't agree with it, and the book that he handed Lincoln was actually not a book that was, Dr. Merrick approved. He was trying to get Lincoln to be ready, and the reason he wanted him to be ready is because he wants to bring the whole thing down by shooting media, like shooting like TV, and he needed someone from inside the community like Lincoln to want to do it. So Merrick is like, it'll never work. He sends people after them. McCrod gets killed. That's Steve Buscemi. He gets killed. So Lincoln and Jordan are then on camera. They tell the world, but people still don't want to believe that someone would treat humans this way. Merrick unknowingly reveals that all of this is his plot, and he goes, "I can't believe you made me do this." Like, that classic, because
right.
So he doesn't know that he's on camera, but he reveals it all. Then Merrick attempts to kill Lincoln and Jordan. Lincoln fights back and ultimately kills Merrick. Right? And in the end, we're left with Jordan and Lincoln, who are now struggling with the idea of what to do with all these human farms / communities, now that they don't no longer have a purpose, but everyone in the communities doesn't know what the real world is.
Oh, interesting.
And that's where the movie ends, sort of on a happy note. And what I really wanted to emphasize here was like, the reason Lincoln wants to get out is because of his own desire to understand more. Why am I special?
Right.
Am I in fact special, or am I just a human being? Like, does the reason that I'm special is simply just because I exist, not because I have a goal to achieve, a reason to exist. I just exist. That's the Sartre part. The other part that I want to get to is Dr. Merrick. In the original movie, they often refer to Dr. Merrick as having a god complex, and in fact, he created the clones. He's the one who is their god. And then in my version, and in the original this happens as well, but Lincoln kills Merrick. He literally kills the god.
Oh, that's
his
interesting.
own god. So we get Nietzsche,
right.
and
That's
so at the end, at the end when he kills Merrick, we're left with this idea of like, what is the community's purpose, but also, like, God is dead and we have killed him. Classic Nietzsche. Mm-hmm. What does that mean for us as a society? Right? Because they had a purpose. They had a purpose while Dr. Merrick existed. The same way that Nietzsche describes the way we have a purpose as long as we believed in God. When we no longer believed in God, we no longer had a purpose, right? And so we get sort of this very existential, young adult. Yeah, with some, I still want to have some romance in there between Lincoln and Jordan, because I just think that works as a good vehicle, but it's sort of a side plot. The real meat and potatoes is about understanding what it means to question your own existence, and then what it means to go beyond and be like, oh, actually we don't have a purpose, and actually the reason we don't have a purpose is because I killed it. I killed the reason we exist.
Yeah. I like that element. No, I like that take on it.
I did change it a lot though.
Yeah.
Like they never actually leave the facility.
Oh interesting. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But I like that component. I like because one of the things that you definitely were able to bring out more, which is lacking in the first one, because it's the reasons for leaving are kind of arbitrary. I mean, he does. it just seems scattered in a way, because he does see this thing happen to the guy who's brought in and they're cutting him open, but it just almost feels too convenient, and it just feels like it's there as a way to get him to leave. It doesn't feel organic, is what I mean. And I think part of that is because even up to that point, while he's asking questions, it doesn't really... None of that really seems to be actually the thing that propels him to leave.
Yeah.
Which would have made more sense.
Even when he finds the insect, I never felt like there was a need for him to want to know more.
Yeah, exactly.
I felt like, to me, it felt like Lincoln's own desire, his own questions that we see him have in the original movie are enough of a reason for him want to know more.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I felt like the more Merrick shuts him down, or the more that McCord talks about other things, the more he should be like, something is strange here. I have this internal desire to want to know more. And I felt like this would be a great idea to sort of parallel this existentialism with the growing up of puberty and relationships. Like, that's why I just feel like it would make a great YA novel. Like, you're coming into your own, even if you want to get a little bit like parental about it, when you're younger, your parents are in essence your kind of god figure. They tell you what to do and what not to do, and as you grow up, particularly around the age of puberty and high school and later, but particularly around those age, we start to have pushback, I exist separately from you and I don't have to do what you tell me to. Classic rebellion, however you want to see that.
Yeah. It's also, it's got echoes of Truman Show in it as well.
Yeah, I actually think that this movie is basically a shittier version of Transformers, The Truman Show, and Jurassic Park.
Yeah, well, and actually another movie that it's very similar to is Never Let Me Go.
I don't know that one.
So that's basically, imagine this, but good.
Oh.
But the thing that's interesting is the characters in that know that they are going to, know that they
Is it based off of the book?
Yeah, it is.
I think I've read the book. I think I've read the book.
Okay, so it's basically it's about characters dealing with their own mortality.
Yeah.
So they know that they are going to. So it's the difference between this and that is the characters know the world. It has been told. It has been revealed to them what their purpose is,
and they grew up in an orphanage or whatever, and
something to that effect. Yeah, it's like a home that they live in. And,
I think I read the book that this is based on. Actually, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it's basic, but what's interesting with that is they know the characters have to come to terms with their own fates in that, instead of, because one of the things that bugged me with The Island was it was just like, I just thought the characters were idiots.
Yeah, I mean, the only character that I thought was interesting, two characters, were, I actually think that Dr. Merrick is very interesting as a character.
I think he had a lot more potential to be interesting.
Yeah, and I actually think it becomes even more interesting because he sort of becomes the main character in the latter half.
Yeah, exactly.
It starts to focus much more on him and his personal wants and needs, and that kind of reminded me of the Truman Show. How like the controller,
the Ed Harris character,
is almost like we see his wants and needs very clearly. The other one that I really really like, I think Steve Buscemi's character is really interesting, as we talked about, and then I also think the sort of head of security.
Yeah,
the security guy,
Jimon Hunsu.
Yeah,
Jimon Hunsu. I think that's how his name's pronounced.
I know the character's name is Albert Laurent.
Yeah. I agree. Though the whole speech where he's talking about like they branded me when I was.
They should have. I immediately was like, there is so much more they should have done with this character.
I agree. I thought that was like. How do you just like throw that in our lap and then just walk away? Like, what? That is interesting.
If this movie was better,
well, actually, okay. So I had.
Go on.
Oh, okay. Well, I had two thoughts. Actually, I'll get into my pitch in a second. But I had two thoughts on the movie in terms of how I would approach it. One was either mine ends up being a bit more of like a Black Mirror episode, I suppose. Which they're basically like feature-length movies, but the way it's sort of constructed, I don't know if it'd be long enough. But the other thing too, I was thinking as I was watching it, I was going, there is potential for there to be like you could do something with this like what they did with Westworld, where you explore all the characters and all their motivations within the context of this thing that's going on. And that also could have been very interesting, because there's this whole world here that's being created, and there's a lot of characters, and each of them do actually have, some of them actually have some very interesting motivations and some interesting ethical quandaries in which they find themselves in. So there's a lot of room there as well. But in order to pitch this, I've had to strip it down. There's no way I was going to outline an entire TV series for this.
Well, see, I think that's really, really interesting, because we've talked about this before, and you know my thoughts. I love cinema, but I think that the longer format of television, and we also talked about this. I don't know if we ever actually talked about this on the show, but we had a conversation where you said that you, in your opinion, television is cinema.
It is, I think.
It's filmed the same way. It's filmed the same way. The only difference that we've talked about is that film tends to focus on like big epic, not just action, but like the events, like big epic events, because they have bigger budgets for it. Whereas my preference, and I prefer television because it tends to tell more character-focused stories. And you still can have that action, but it doesn't tend to be as big. But then with the age of Game of Thrones and stuff like that, you had said, we're seeing sort of a revolution where the lines between cinema, in terms of movie cinema and TV cinema, are becoming much blurrier. Where we're going to see that kind of methodical methodology towards shot composition, towards epic. Events and whatnot are going to happen on the small screen as well.
Yeah, well, the thing that would have distinguished them before was that and when I say cinema, I'll make the distinction. I'll say feature-length movie. With those, because of their budgets and because of the way, the time in which they had to make them, it was more focused on the visual storytelling. And that's not to say television wasn't, but I would say the ratio in terms of how it's approached, the history in film is more, if you look at the broader history of film, a lot of it is filmmakers experimenting with how can they use the visual form to tell a story. And then that is now just, in my opinion, starting to really become more, I'd say, noticeable in television. Not that it didn't exist before. Like some shows like The Twilight Zone actually did some really interesting things in terms of how they were actually shot as shows. But I think the one thing that you're going to start seeing more in television is more, because one of the things that film, I think what you can still do in an hour-and-a-half movie is you can explore something that's a little more abstract. And so like an example of this would be the movie Tree of Life, which is a very meditative movie. And it's asking a lot of big questions, but it's doing it in a very almost ethereal way. It's a very hard thing to describe for anybody who hasn't seen it, but that's not. I don't think that kind of story, that theme, could really be explored the same way in a television show. Yeah. That's maybe the only distinction I would make in terms of how you see them exhibited. But I do think that television is or can be cinematic in terms of the way the visuals are used. The style complements the content, and to me, it basically gets to a point where the style and the content are indistinguishable from each other. That to me is like when a really good piece of film or a really good piece of television does that.
Yeah, we're almost getting to the point where we're going to have like film cinema and we're going to have television cinema.
Yeah.
Like that kind of distinction where you still have differences in storytelling, but the craft, like you say, the stylistic elements will be on par. Like people will study TV shows the same way that we've studied film, not just for the narrative, but for the stylistic craft elements.
So one show, I think, and I've said this, I probably sound like a broken record on this, but True Detective Season 1, to me, was one of the first times where I saw it and I went, oh, okay, this is like a 9-hour movie.
Yeah.
And because the other thing, too, in that case is one director for all the episodes. So there's this singularity of vision that goes through the entire season, which is what at the time was unprecedented, or I felt, at least. Anyway... so I'll get into my pitch.
Yeah, go right ahead. Otherwise, we're going to start talking about television.
Yeah, we can go on for
I will
hours.
say that the first time I really noticed it, that sort of like was in Daredevil. in the first season of Daredevil.
Oh, okay.
But that was the first time I noticed it with the hallway fight, where I was like, this is shot amazingly. So there was an attention to that style. And the second time that I really was blown away, I was like, this is like watching a movie, was Chernobyl.
Oh, yeah, which is basically like a 6-hour movie.
It is, yeah. Anyway, sorry, I want to hear you pitch.
Okay, cool. So, so in mine, Lincoln, that's the Ewan McGregor character, he knows that things are not quite as they seem. He doesn't know exactly what's going on, but he knows that it's like, oh, maybe where he knows more than what he's letting on to, let's say. And in my version, he's been able to, like the Steve Buscemi character, or Buscemi or whatever,
yeah.
He's got a friend of someone who's outside, and he's able to go and interact with them. And I've made a female character. Her name's Lisa in this one. And basically, because of she's looked kindly on him, and they've sort of struck up a friendship. And anyway, he tells her one day that he's planning to escape, because he feels like it is just because he just wants to know. He just wants to know what's out there, and he feels like this is not where he belongs. But she asks him, "But why would you want to leave?" Like, I mean, actually, no. Like, I get it, but like, you have everything you need. It's a comfortable place, because the world this is going back to what I was talking about with it. It's not perfect. Like, there are certain things that are controlled for you, but you actually live a very comfortable life here. My life outside is not as comfortable as yours. Anyway, he tells her that he actually has figured out a way out. And he's been trying to work up the courage to ask his friend Jordan, who is the Scarlett Johansson character, he's going to ask her to escape with him. But before he's able to do that, she wins the lottery. And so what he tells her is, he says, look, I'm going to come and I'm going to find you on the island. I'm not going to make you wait for me. I'm going to break out of here and I'm going to come find you on the island. So that night he actually breaks out that night. And when he gets outside, it's a sequence that's more or less the same in terms of like him, once he actually leaves, he passes through that barrier, and then he sees that the world's completely different. And he comes above ground, and he immediately goes, okay, I know I was being misled before, but this is completely different. So he's outside, and he finds his way to a highway, and he finds like someone's passing by, and he waves them down, and he asks them if they know where the island is. And these people look at him like, well, what are you talking about?
Like, you're in the middle of California, bud. Yeah,
dressed in a one-piece suit, whatever it is you're wearing. Anyway, so he kind of like, the one thing I actually thought the movie did well was the lighters. Like, that was a neat little way to get, I'm just going to steal that. That's how he finds Lisa, or something like that. He's able to find Lisa.
Oh, the matches. Sorry.
Yeah, the matches. Sorry. And he goes and he finds her, and she takes him home and introduces him to her kids. And she basically explains to him, she starts by saying, like, look, I'm really, really sorry, but you have been lied to. And she owns up to him and explains, like, look, you were created, you're clones that were ordered to be harvested to help people, and I don't agree with it, but I had to do it. I'm a technician, and I have student loans, and I have kids, and this is the only job that would pay me enough in America to be able to do this.
Yeah, classism sucks.
Yeah, exactly. And she says, and like you, I'm trapped in a system and I can't get out of it.
So smart.
But she says, and he says, okay. And she explains that your friend Jordan is probably going to be harvested for organs. And Lincoln says, well, I have to go back and I have to rescue her. I can't let her die. And she says, you can't. There is no way you will be able to get back there and rescue her. They're already going to be looking for you. In my version, the other thing I didn't get was why they couldn't track the bracelets or something like that. Like,
yeah, like how hard is GPS?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, they're already going to be looking for you. So she helps him figure out a way so that they can't track him. And then she says, look, if you want to save Jordan, you have to go and find her original and ask her original to basically to forego this treatment.
To die.
And explain to her, basically. And if you can do that, then maybe you can find a way to save Jordan. So meanwhile, Merrick has sent out his security detail. He doesn't go outside. He actually has like his own team of people inside.
Yeah, that seems like he probably would. Like,
Yeah, exactly. So he's sent someone. They're already looking for him. Lincoln makes his way to Los Angeles, where he finds Jordan in real life, and her name is Sarah Jordan, and she's going to surgery. And he goes to the hospital, and he basically tries to explain to her, like, look, you're not, like, I am a clone, and I know you're a clone, and this is what's happening. And she says, honey, why are you being crazy? Like, what's gotten into you? She goes back to sleep or something, and then her husband shows up, and her husband is actually the original for Lincoln.
Oh!
So, and it's Tom Lincoln, and Tom Lincoln basically takes Lincoln home and says, look, my wife is dying, and I have enough money that we could both have insurance plans. She doesn't know about this. She has no idea. But I know, and now Tom, the real Tom, actually has to basically deal with the consequences of what he has asked for.
Yeah.
And so he's now meeting, and he's basically wrestling with this idea of, like, well, I didn't think they would have souls. I didn't think they would have feelings. I didn't know they would feel. I didn't know you would feel the same things that I feel. Anyway, he says, look, you can, I don't know how to help you, but I can let you stay here in the meantime until Sarah gets better, and we'll figure out a way to manage this. Anyway, Tom thinks about this, and one night Tom decides, basically, he realizes he's not. Lincoln realizes. So Lincoln is the clone, and Tom is the original. And Lincoln decides I can't convince this guy. In fact, I'm pretty sure this guy's going to betray me. So that night he goes to kill Tom in his sleep. And just as he's about to kill Tom says, like, hey, if you were in my position, like, you would do, like, you're going to do the same thing. Like, he has this moment where he goes, wait, I was going to kill you to try and stay alive, and now you're killing me to stay alive. Maybe we aren't so different.
And you, by killing, just to clarify, by killing you mean, like, I was going to kill you in terms of, like, you were my insurance policy.
Yeah,
exactly. Not like I was actively going to kill you, the way that you were actively going to kill me, but there's no difference.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that night he basically has hatched a plan where he replaces the original Tom. And he then pretends to be Tom and phones the company.
Does he actually kill Tom? Does he actually kill Tom?
He actually does. He actually does kill Tom.
Okay.
And he basically sets it up so that the Tom that he killed looks like the copy. So he actually tattoos. He figures out a way to tattoo the barcode on his wrist. He calls the company, and then Merrick himself actually shows up and says and apologizes in person and says, "Look, I'm really sorry, but we have the person for your wife. We're almost ready to save your wife." But it's Lincoln, the clone, and he basically says, "No, don't do it. I don't want to do it anymore. I don't think it's right. Now I've had this," and he's pretending that he's had this change of experience.
Like, this clone came up and tried to kill me, and I had, like, in self-defense, had to kill him back, and now I realize they're people. I don't want to kill another one.
Exactly.
As a setup.
Exactly. So that night, and Merrick says, "Well, we can't. Like, the procedure's already done, and when you signed up for it, you signed this thing saying this is what we were going to do. Like, we're doing it." And Tom says, "Okay, well," he threatens to then, or Lincoln threatens to say, like, "Okay, well, I'm going to tell everybody about this. I think more people should know about this. At this point, it's just for a very exclusive class of elites. And so the greater public, like in the original, the greater public does not know yet."
Yeah.
So he threatens to expose this. So later, Merrick goes back to the cloning facility or whatever. They look at the body and they realize that the body they have is actually the original. And they're like, "Okay, what are we going to do? Like, We've got this whole mess on our hands. Like, one of our clones just killed the original. How are we going to clean this up?" And Merrick has an idea. So he calls back the clone and he says, "Okay, let's make a deal. We haven't killed the clone of Jordan yet. We haven't killed her. What we could do is we could allow the original Sarah to die. And we could switch her out with the clone that we were going to operate on to save her. And then you both can live together and have this life that you wanted with her. And so basically the movie ends then with Lisa gets a call from Lincoln, and she goes to meet him, and he shows up with all this money and says, here's the money to pay off your student loans. And then he gets in the car with Jordan. We don't know if it's the Jordan clone or if it's the original Jordan, but then they drive away together.
Drive off into the sunset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's my version of
I
the
like
island.
that you play around with class a lot.
Oh yeah, thanks.
One of the things that I think works really, really well that in the movie that you could definitely play around with is like when Lincoln asks Tom, how much was I worth?
Mm-hmm.
Like almost as if he's saying, like, how much did it cost to make a human? How much is a human life worth? Mm-hmm. Right? And I thought that was so poignant, and they didn't do anything with it. But how much is it worth to you?
Exactly.
If you kill me, how much is that worth? How much?
Exactly.
I just think because we always say you can't put a price on life, and yet literally that is what. And I think you could do a lot with capitalism, like in making fun of class structures there, where you're just like everyone is in a trap. Lisa's in a trap. Jordan and Lincoln are in a trap. But all of this stems from how people can be bought in different ways. Lincoln and Jordan are literally bought products. But then, like, Lisa had her silence, her basically, she was part of this crime, quote unquote, through being paid. She was bought off. And then, Lincoln, and then in the end, when Dr. America's like, we can actually switch Jordan with, or switch Sarah with Jordan, and nobody would be the wiser. It's like, well, is Lincoln now being bought off?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's the whole idea I want to play with, where basically throughout the movie you're questioning the idea of like, oh, well, they're not the same as we are. They wouldn't do the same things as we are. And he believes that about himself. He goes, I would never do that. I would. And then by the end of the movie, he has done the exact same thing.
And so the ambiguity around whether that's Sarah or Jordan is very important, because you leave it up to interpretation. Is he the same or is he not?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Because we know he's capable of killing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Oh, I really like that. It reminds me of Deus Ex.
Deus Ex.
The one with the robot? The one where...
Ex Machina.
Yeah, Ex Machina. The way that, like, the robot, I can't remember what her name is, but the way that she, like she's like, oh, we're different, but then all the things that she does are the same things that her creator does.
Yeah.
The secretiveness, the lying, the killing, all of these things she learned from him.
Yeah.
Oh,
cool. That's one of my favorite, like, of the last 10 years, for that same reason. It's because it asks a lot of those same questions.
Brilliant. I love it. I love it. It's great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
While you were talking, I did realize, while you were talking, I realized my pitch is just The Giver. I was thinking about it because, like, you started talking about, like, and I even used the term community, and then you started, like, going into your pitch, and all of a sudden I was like, oh shit, I think I just wrote The Giver. I mean, it's not, but it is. So, but yeah. I like both our pitches. This has got to be one of our better ones. Both of those pitches were excellent.
Oh man, I had so much fun with this. I was like, it was funny because I'll admit I was panicking a little bit. Like the hour before, I had another pitch, and I was like, and I was looked at it, and I was like, it just doesn't work. And then I rewrote it. Like I was writing it when I messaged you. I had just finished writing it.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, okay. Figured it out. I was really worried my pitch was going to fall flat, but yeah.
No, I'm glad you rewrote it because that was excellent.
Thank you. Well, because one of the issues I ran into, like you said, there are a lot of I think one of the things the original suffers from is there's almost too many ideas that are planted, and because it never takes the time to specify we are going to focus on this and explore it. That's one of the reasons why it just kind of meanders and then becomes just a Michael Bay action movie.
Yeah, and I think the reason that both our pitches work really well in this instance is because they're both or this movie is smart.
Yeah.
But I think that this movie is in fact smart. I just think it's done badly.
I think so too. Yep.
And you know, oftentimes we do bad movies. I mean, we did Tarzan, and Tarzan was not a smart movie.
No, it wasn't.
Tarzan has now, like, in terms of the bar has been set for how low my expectations are. Tarzan is now like the worst of the worst we've done on CineMasters.
I think, actually, yeah, I would put that in Transformers, or I would actually put, I think Tarzan is probably.
I think Tarzan was worse than Transformers because Transformers was at least entertaining.
At least Transformers had some cool robots and explosions and things.
And great sound design. We talked about that, but like even the sound effects, like you can definitely see, I think, the improvement from The Island to Transformers.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Like, and that's why I made the comment of, like, I feel like Michael Bay just shoots long commercials because they look cool, they sound cool, but there's no substance, and any substance that's there is just sort of anecdotal.
Yeah, but I truly think that the reason our pitches work really well for this movie is because there's substance there.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas
there was something there.
With Tarzan and Transformers, I felt like maybe we were both scraping, you know, by our nails, scraping the bottom of the barrel for anything, just grasping at straws.
I felt that way too. In fact, I take back what I said about Tarzan being the perfect CineMasters movie. I think this is a much better CineMasters movie for that reason, that there was something there already. Because I felt the same way with Tarzan. I had a hard time finding anything.
The worst movies are not movies that are bad. The worst movies are movies that are disappointing.
Exactly, and this falls very much into that category.
Exactly. Yeah. And I really like both of these pitches. This is going in the save pitch file.
I think, you know what we should do? I was thinking about this. We should do like one day we should revisit some of our favorite pitches and just talk about, like, and go, oh, well, this is what I liked about this one.
Yeah, I definitely think we should do that. For sure. I mean, we could definitely go back and be like, which pitches are the best, or reread them and just be like, I really want to go over this pitch and talk about it again.
Yeah.
I think that would be super fun if we did like a special episode of that.
Yeah, that would be cool. But I think because the other thing too is, like, with this, and I think Matrix we also talked about. That was another one we both felt good about. It was, again, because there was already something there.
Well, because I've talked about The Matrix before. The Matrix is a brilliant movie. We just both thought that there was things that could have been better about it.
Exactly. And I felt, and I remember as I was watching this, I was going, man, I wish I could have, like, this would be the sort of thing where it's like, I feel like if I read this as a first draft, I would go, oh, I know where to take this. Yeah. Like, I know there's something here, you could take it and make it even better than what you've got.
Yeah. And I also actually think that this movie, if it had spent more time on characters and story, and you cut out some of the action sequences, could have been tighter.
Oh, I agree.
Like, even the way it was, without even rewriting the script, I just think we need more character time. For instance, there's that one scene where they're on top of the building on, like, the Avengers A or whatever as it falls.
Oh,
yeah. And I was like, this seems unnecessary. Like, we just had this huge action sequence on the highway, and then they, like, crashed through a building on the jet bike and landed up on, like, a giant sign, Avengers A, and I was like, I am done with this action scene.
I agree. I'm not gonna lie. Actually, that entire chunk of the movie, I skipped through parts of it
for sure.
Because I was like, there's no story, and I was like, I had a feeling I could probably skip this, and I'm not gonna miss anything important.
Yeah, there is one scene that I do regret not having in my pitch, and that is, I really like the scene. I don't know why I really like this scene. I think just because the intrigue. I really like the scene when Steve Buscemi is buying the train ticket and they're sort of like waiting and the bad guys show up. I just feel like that moment, like where you're holding your breath and like Steve is just like, run! And I don't know, something about that whole sequence where they're like on the run but like trying to get away and somebody is helping them. Like, I really think that more people, if they'd found out that they were clones, would have helped them. Like, we're not asking for your help, that kind of thing. Or sorry, we're not telling you anything, we're asking for your help. And it's like if a human being asks for your help, you help them. Like, that's just human nature. And I feel like more people would, I don't know, I thought that was a great scene. And I think we needed more scenes like that and less scenes like stupid train anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I feel very much the same way, which is why I feel like I wonder what other material was there. Like I feel like there was, even within the dailies, there was probably a better movie.
Yeah. It's a shame. It really is a shame sometimes where you get this movie, because this is probably my favorite Michael Bay movie.
You know what? I have not seen Armageddon, and I have not seen The Rock. So I don't.
The Rock might be. The Rock is a great one, but
because The Rock, I've seen parts of The Rock, and it just seems like an excuse for this really over-the-top action movie that is actually somewhat justified.
Yeah, I'm totally okay with over-the-top action movies, and that's why this movie is like disappointing, because it like, I think you could have had your cake and eaten it too on this movie.
Yeah,
like I think this movie. Go on.
This was not an action movie. This just to me was not an action movie. It should not have been an action movie. But it was more. It was better off being something more cerebral, I think.
Yeah, but I actually think you could, like I said, you could have had your cake and eaten it too. You could have had a really, really smart movie that had some action in it. Mm-hmm. And it didn't need to be like over the top highway action movie, like what we got. But I just think, like a couple. Like even a cool fight scene, like they did that setup we talked about where they're like fighting in the simulator.
Right.
Like even just a cool fight scene would have been fun. I think this movie could have been smart, and it could have been an action movie. Maybe not big set piece action movie, but it could have been smart.
Yeah. I mean, like when I think of smart action movies, I think of like the Bourne trilogy, where it's action, but a lot of like, especially kind of, I like the later, the second and the third one more, because it's more about the kind of the espionage.
Okay,
yeah. But to me, like that sort of fits in the realm of an action movie, even if it's more of it's kind of a spy thriller, I guess.
I always think of, when I think of smart action movies, I don't know, maybe I just have a really high bar, but I think of like The Matrix and Inception.
Yeah.
Movies that are like really, really, really cerebral, really thought out. But then when you watch them, there's also like high action sequences.
Right. Actually, Inception is definitely. I'm also thinking Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Oh, one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, like that, because again, there's something that's balletic. Is that a word? There's just something that's it's so beautiful, the way the movements, and it's like a dance. It's very stylized, but that's what I like about it.
Yeah, but at the same time, you're still thinking about like in Crouching Tiger, for instance, you're still thinking like every move they make in the fight scene is like a chess move.
Right. Yeah. Well, because there's exactly.
So it's like a chess maneuver, but then also you're thinking about what each of these two characters' motivations are.
Exactly, because it's also reflective of there's an internal conflict that's going on that's being expressed in this physical.
It's not just
combat.
the fight. It's not just the fight. I'm thinking particularly about when the two female characters are fighting. Mm-hmm. And one of them is trying to figure out if the other one did it or whatnot, or
right, yeah.
And so we sort of see them trying to like figure out each other, like where are we here? And so it becomes not just an external chess match of like every move could cost you your life, but an internal chess match of like, who are we against each other? Who am I to you? Who are you to you? And I think you get that. And in Inception, it's not quite as personal, but Inception, you know when they're like racing down on snowmobiles and whatnot. Like racing against the time, and you're like, there's big snowmobiles and guns, but meanwhile, the entire time, the clock is ticking because they only have so much time, in this dream, and then the dream above that, and the dream above that, and that's why I think the action sequences in Inception work so well, is because, like, and the way that like Nolan layers them through editing, so we'll get like 15 minutes in the snow fortress, and then it'll go to like the hotel, and then it'll go to the city, and then and each time we have less and less time. Mm-hmm. Each cut has less and less time because, he's trying to be like, the clock is ticking. We're all on an airplane and we have 6 hours, but like every time you go deeper, time gets elongated. You know what I mean? So like the way that it's edited too, it constantly has you thinking, what are we here to do? What's the goal?
Yeah, exactly.
And so you're thinking not just, oh man, like I'm snowmobiling and shooting guns. We're also thinking about like, how do you implant an idea? Where is Cobb's wife? Like all of these are happening all at once. You're always thinking about them. Plus, dreams are crazy, man. How the heck did that work?
Yeah. Well,
it's smart.
Yeah. We can talk about Inception forever.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe we should get back on track.
Yeah.
The island is this was fun. This was a fun one. I'm excited to see if we can find other like movies that had potential.
I agree.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add?
No. My wireless is about to run out of battery, so we should probably wrap it up.
Cool. Where can people find you?
Draper Nate on Instagram. Twitter is Nate Draper, and Letterboxd is Draper Nate. Yeah, follow me on Letterboxd.
You can follow my band Robot Philosopher on Facebook, on YouTube, and I think we're on Instagram as well. And I don't know what we're going to do next time, but it's going to be good. And peace out.
Yeah, have a good one.